We have come to the inevitable blame game. The United States says the Iraqi military doesn't have the will to fight, and it's your fault that ISIS continues to move forward. Meantime, the Iraqi military comes back and says, wait a minute, you Americans, you don't have the will to fight for us. It's time to go ahead and find out who's blowing smoke and who's got it real and who's actually telling the truth. I'm Ed Berliner, and this is The Hardline.
I had a chance this morning to talk to Governor Abbott of Texas to express condolences for the terrible flooding that's been taking place there. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families and the communities that have been affected by some of these devastating, record-breaking floods.
There are a lot of Australians overseas right now, about 100, fighting with terrorist groups in the Middle East. We will be legislating within a few weeks to strip dual citizens involved in terrorism of their Australian citizenship.
The Iraqi security forces who are fighting in Ramadi and have been fighting in Ramadi for a year and a half didn't have the benefit of the training of the United States and our coalition partners. There were clearly, as the Iraqis have indicated, some military command and planning problems that occurred. And we saw a pretty effective tactic used by ISIL.
It makes my heart bleed because we lost Ramadi, but can assure you we can bring it back soon.
You say soon, what are we talking about? Months?
No, I'm talking about days now.
The Iraqi military seems to have gotten a hint and started manning up about protecting their own country. And is it possible for America to defeat ISIS and their ilk if we are not willing to accept collateral damage? Let's kick things off, welcoming in the former Assistant Secretary for Policy at the Department of Homeland Security, Stewart Baker, and the Military Advisor for Concerned Veterans for America and a former member of our military in the Army Special Forces, retired Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
All right, let's go ahead and get to it. Lieutenant Colonel Mann, let me start with you. Here we have the blame game, and let's start right there. Because Ashton Carter comes out and says the Iraqis don't have the will to fight now. Of course, we knew this was going to happen. The Iraqis fire back and say, you in the United States better start looking at your own house because it's your fault that ISIS continues to move forward. In your opinion, who takes the blame here?
We broke it, we buy it. We made the decision to go into Iraq years ago. We knew that this military that we've stood up there is a very nascent military. This kind of foreign internal defense, Ed, it takes a long time. I've been an advisor my whole life all over the world. And if you're going to work with armies like this, you don't go in for a few years and then pull out. You have to stay with it. It takes time. It takes a lot of patience. It's hard. But we need to bear some serious responsibility for this. You can't just pull out and say, have a good time storming the castle.
Stewart, it would seem that, again, we have people even here in the United States who are saying the same thing. A former senior U.S. military officer in Iraq says the Shiites are more capable than the Iraqi army. They are embedding more advisors, and that's where we have failed. Do you agree?
Well, I don't know that that's the only failure, but it is true. Turns out the Shiite militias have a foreign patron who's willing to stick with them a little longer than we've been willing to stick with the Iraqi army.
So then Ashton Carter, in the comments he made, is he basically just maybe trying to cover up a little bit of the administration's failure here by go ahead and start to point that blame at Iraq?
You know, I don't doubt that there was behavior by the Iraqi army that justified what he said. But a lot of that was they didn't have someone with them that could assure them help is coming, resources are coming, we are with you. It's a very delicate thing to build the kind of esprit you need to hang in when things are looking bad. So I think some of the failures of morale that Ash Carter pointed to really do lie at our doorstep.
All right, so Scott, let me get back to you then. Now that the Iraqi forces have launched a major military operation, they're going after the Anbar province from ISIS and other places as well. Do they have, and keeping that esprit de corps and that leadership here in our conversation right now, suddenly they've decided to go ahead, launch the offensive. In your opinion, do they have even close to enough and enough willpower to actually get the job done?
Well, I'm skeptical. I mean, time will see. I'm pretty skeptical on this. I mean, I certainly haven't seen it so far. And there's one other thing I would point out, Ed. and it's something that I talk a lot about in my book, Game Changers, is this rift between the Shia dominated government and the Sunni areas where ISIS has set up shop. This is a major, major challenge. This isn't just a matter of the state security apparatus going into an undergoverned area. This Shia-Sunni split is a major, major problem. And every time the Shia-dominated government moves on these areas, people huddle around that, and it mobilizes people to action that are not necessarily ISIS supporters, but are Sunnis.
But then let me get to that, and let me make a point here with regard to the Shia-Sunni split and all the splits in these different countries right now. Are we getting to the point where we have to start breaking the country up? We have to give the Shias their land, the Sunnis their land, everybody the land they want, and stop walking away from this, what seems to be ridiculous notion that we can unify a country.
Yeah, I think at best it's probably a federated approach, but again, it goes back to the concept, Ed, that we broke it, we bought it. We're in there, and this stuff's going to follow us home. My proposition here is that we've got special ops guys buttoned up on their bases and not working out in these tribal areas from the bottom up, where frankly we were working with Sunnis back in '06. We've just abandoned those guys. A lot of our resources, Ed, that we have at our disposal, we're not using. We're just buttoning up and hoping it all works out. Not a good way to fight a war, my friend.
All right, now, would you agree with that, Stewart, that we have what's needed there, we have the resources, and we're just, I don't know whether you want to say scared to use it, hesitant to use it, politically correct, hesitant to use it? What's the answer here?
Yeah, I think the administration really wants to have the Iraqi government do this on its own, and they've listened to people who say that the Iraqi army can do it on their own. But
who are those people, though, Stewart? I mean, let's get to this way. Who are those people right now? Because it doesn't seem as if any of them are actually telling the truth that they can do it on their own.
Well, when you attribute the failures of the Iraqi army to an unprofessional conduct and a willingness to run and a lack of fighting spirit, you're really saying you could win, it's just up to you, and it's not our fault that you're failing. I think that's wrong. All
right, I got 2 minutes left. So let me hit one thing here, and this comes from the New York Times. They're basically saying the U.S. is doing the right job here in not going after civilians. They point out that American officials know where, the analysts know exactly where the headquarters of the Islamic State is, yet they won't go there because they're afraid of killing civilians. Stewart, to you first. Does the United States have to understand that if you're going to win a war, you're going to have to kill civilians? It's going to happen. It's collateral damage.
Yeah, it looks as though ISIS got most of its troops in position to take Ramadi by putting them in not in trucks, but in civilian sedans, so you couldn't tell them from the ordinary civilian traffic, precisely because they knew that we would not attack civilian transport. Our enemies have learned a lot about what we will and will not do, and they're taking full advantage of it.
Stewart, do we have the belly for it, though, as a nation?
I think we probably don't. And I frankly, in a context where we're trying to do it remotely, the likelihood that we would succeed, even if we were willing to inflict a lot more casualties on civilians, is pretty small. We'd need to be on the ground even if we had a greater appetite for that kind of damage.
Scott, would you agree that although we may not want to kill, look, we don't want to kill innocent people here, but they're using them as human shields, they continue to move forward, and we've got to accept that it's just a part of war?
No, I disagree. I think that if you try to do standoff attacks against embedded terrorists in Sunni populations, you're going to mobilize more of them against you. It's not going to work. We've tried it before. It's not going to work.
So then what do we do then, knowing full well that we know where they are? Right now, we know where the leadership is. How do we then get to them?
I think you can do targeted strikes and raids. I also think there are a number of resilient Sunnis who are still resisting. We're not even trying to work with them right now. Help them stand up.
But if indeed some of those targeted strikes do kill some civilians, do we have to then just understand that it's the cost of war?
Of course. Yeah, that's part of doing business. I'm simply saying that striking targets that are intentionally embedded within Sunni populations as just our only option, it won't work. It'll mobilize them against us.
That you are exactly right. The population will only turn against us again, and we start all over from square one. Scott, Mann, Stewart Baker, gentlemen, I want to thank you for bringing some common sense and some actual issues and some answers to both of these things and all these things. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, it is a question that needs to be answered. Do we have the stomach, and who's got the stomach to get the job done? Stay with us. This is The Hard Line.